Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives, or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Today I will be discussing all the different options to support a woman during labour to find comfort and be able to manage the intense sensations of labour. We are often told that the only options to get through labour are the drugs. They are certainly tools in the toolbox, but there are many other options also that don't have the same side effects to you or your baby. Get ready to fill your toolkit by listening to this episode. You will likely want to record these other options if you are preparing to give birth. Enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching, and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Welcome, everybody. It's another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast. And today I thought I would talk about a particular topic that I think everybody should consider when it comes to preparing for birth, and that is building up your toolkit. Finding comfort in labour is one of the most important things you're going to need to do. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is that they get given advice by random people who say this: I've got one bit of advice for you. Have the drugs, have the epidural. Now, there is a place for the drugs, and I talk about that in another episode. So if you're interested to find out more, please go back and look for it. But the message under the message is that you're not going to be able to deal with it. And that's why I have a real problem with it. But the other big thing is that it can set you up to have only one tool in the toolkit. Now, you don't want to do that. You want to have a big toolkit that has a lot of options for you in finding comfort in labour. Now, the drugs have their place in certain circumstances, but here's the thing: most of the time we don't need them, particularly if we're well prepared and well supported. Okay, so what we want to do is put the drugs at the bottom of the toolkit, and they're to be used if, the conditions are really getting very, very difficult, because those drugs always come at a cost. They come at a cost to mum and they come at a cost to baby. Sometimes that cost is worth paying. Most of the time, though, we don't need it. And the reason is this: there's a whole lot of other things that you can use that help you to find comfort in labour that don't have those residual effects. And that's what this podcast is going to be talking about today. Now, recently I surveyed 260 of my families, and they came back saying 63% found that most of their labour was between manageable and painless. And when I was working with Calm Birth, we had similar statistics. It was based on 1,800 women, and the same deal. They had 60% of women got through because they found their labour manageable to painless. So what does that mean? These are people who have prepared well, and they've done that by harnessing their mind and down-regulating their stress response. Because the more relaxed you are in labour, the more manageable labour becomes. Now, for most of us, that takes a bit of training, and that's why the practices that we use in my course, and courses like calm birth and hypnobirthing are very, very powerful because they help downregulate that stress response. There was a study also done at the Royal Women's in Sydney, and they had a sample size of 110, and they have found that 60% of women who'd done calm birth got through with no need for pain relief, 70% with gas only. So once again, that reinforces this understanding that most of the time we don't need it. And certainly as a doula, I could count on one hand the amount of women who needed that extra help. And it was usually because the labor was getting a little bit complex. Okay, so I can guarantee you that given the right preparation and support, that cultivating the belief that, you know what, I'm not likely to need it, but if I do, it's at the bottom of the toolkit. Now, the reason most of the time we don't need the drugs is because, well, one, we've got endorphins, so we've got our own drugs. So we want to maximize the capacity for us to make use of our endorphins, but also we want to be able to find comfort in labor. And it's really interesting when you watch a woman who isn't restricted, who feels safe, loved, and supported, how she intuitively does different things in her labor that support her to manage the intensity, but not only that, supports the physiological descent of the baby. Okay, so one of the points I want to make with this, when it comes to finding comfort in labor, don't let yourself get stuck on the bed. Now, if you do need to be continuously monitored, then I'd encourage you to ask for the Bluetooth monitor, which enables you to still move. And sometimes, even if it's appropriate, negotiate a few breaks from the monitor so you can have a little bit of space to just move around and do things that support the physiology of the labor. There's a deep, deep intelligence in the woman's body. And when she isn't being influenced by her environment in a negative way, and she's able to go internally into herself, she typically finds different things to do that support her and bring her comfort, which 9 times out of 10 is actually supporting the descent of that baby and the physiological opening of her body. So that's why it's important you don't get stuck on the bed. So let's talk about a few of these comfort measures. And if you're preparing for birth and you're listening to this podcast, you might want to grab a little notepad to write these down. Now, one of the most important things to realize that the sensations that a woman has when she's having a contraction are a very broad feeling. So it's this sort of part around her lower back and around the front, her belly. The uterus, which has the baby, is actually contracting. Okay, and what it's trying to do is open the door and push that baby down. And so that's why the sensations are very intense, because it's a big, powerful muscle doing a big, powerful job. And in order for that muscle to do that job, we need to be as relaxed as we can and keep the blood flow and the oxygen with the uterus, not go into stress where the blood gets rediverted into our arms and legs. Okay. Now, because it's such a broad feeling, those sensations, that and it often feels very tight and like there's intense pressure, then hot packs are really powerful. Hot packs on her lower back, hot packs on her belly. A shower is also very similar to a hot pack. You just get the nozzle and you put that heat down near her belly or on her lower back. And that, I often say a hot pack is better than morphine because it goes directly to the source of the discomfort. And so that extra pressure and intensity gets soothed by the heat. And then, of course, if you put a hot pack on her lower back with a bit of pressure on it, counteracting the pressure that she's getting from her uterus working really hard. Now, sometimes women don't respond to heat, they respond better to cold. I supported a woman through her whole labor with a cold washer. And I'd just, in the breaks, I'd make it really cold. And when she had a contraction, I'd squeeze it and put it on her lower back. And she got through a whole labor with cold washes. Another place for cold washes is on her forehead. So her forehead, can feel, a little bit of pressure, a bit of counter pressure on her forehead with a bit of coolness can really soothe her and take her attention away from the intensity to a place where she can feel pleasure. Another really powerful strategy is massage. Now, massage, if you can picture this area of her body feeling really tight, it's the counter pressure that really supports that. I supported a woman once having her fourth baby, and she didn't like labor much, and she asked me to be her doula. And when I got into her labor room, her partner didn't sort of realize that he could do much to support her. And so I started to massage her. And she had never been touched in labor. The people around her just left her to it. So there weren't people around her helping her to find comfort. So when I massaged her, she just melted. And we talked about it later. And she said, I'd never, ever had anybody come and touch me during labor. Now, when I was massaging her, I was aware that her partner was a little bit on the outer in the corner. So I said, come over. And he was this big Greek man with these big hands. I said, put your hands on her belly. And he had these lovely hot hands and he put them on her belly, and they were able to look at each other and connect. And I could see the intimacy in that space. And at one point he said, I'm a bit uncomfortable. And I said, bad luck, suck it up. You got to be there for her. And, we had a bit of a chuckle about him complaining of being uncomfortable, but she talked to him later about the benefit and the power of, having his eyes really close to her, his beautiful big hot hands on her belly, and then I was massaging her back. So massage is very, very powerful. You just want to work around the lower back, around that sacral area, putting counter pressure on. There's also another powerful strategy to work with in labor, and that is called the hip squeeze. Now, the hip squeeze is where you bring the heels of your hand into her glutes, which is her bum, from the side, and you squeeze during contractions. When you squeeze during those contractions, you're literally releasing the tension in the pelvis. You're helping the pelvis to open, and that counter pressure can give her a lot of comfort. Another place is to go a little bit higher around the bone, the pelvic girdle, so that hip bone, if you just get underneath it and squeeze, you can try this in your pregnancy. You'll know if this is working for you or not, and you can help your partner adjust their positioning, and you just squeeze. And then when she's finished the contraction, you can release. That supports beautifully the physiology of the labor. Another beautiful technique, now this is a great one to use between the contractions, and that is light touch. So imagine this, you get the back of your fingertips, you start at the bottom of her spine, right down near her bottom, and you bring it up on either side of the spine and then around her shoulders. And then you go back down again, you bring the back of your fingers up on either side of her spine and then go a little bit lower, like you are painting a palm tree. Now that light touch typically gives women goosebumps, and goosebumps are endorphins, and we want to milk those mothers. So light touch is a beautiful thing to do between the contractions. And if she likes it and doesn't feel creeped out by it, because some people do feel creeped out by it, but if she likes it and she's relaxing between the contractions, what do you think's going on with the cervix? It's really soft. It's like jelly. So when the next contraction comes, it can pull back more cervix. So the point I'm making is it's not just during the contractions that are worth focusing on. It's between those contractions when she's not working hard, and she can go even deeper into relaxation with things like light touch. Our skin and our sensors on our skin create a very powerful physiological response. And that pleasure that she can receive during light touch is such a beautiful feeling. And there's a very fine line between pleasure and pain. So light touch is a beautiful thing to do between the contractions. Now, here's the thing with light touch, though. You might try it early in the labor and she says, oh, don't touch me, I don't like it. But don't be afraid to try it later. Okay, because she's continually moving and her body's responding to the intensity of what she's going through. So a tool that doesn't work earlier in labor could work later. And a tool that's working earlier in labour may not work later. So you want to mix this up and keep cycling through a lot of these tools. Now, there's another beautiful modality called acupressure. Acupressure is based on acupuncture. Okay, acupuncture is an Eastern medicine modality that has been developed over thousands of years. Things don't last that long if they're not useful. And of course, acupuncture, I often recommend people to get acupuncture during their pregnancy because it can just promote good health, keeps everything moving and flowing, which is what needs to happen in the body. Particularly if you've been a bit stagnant in your pregnancy, acupuncture can really support the movement of things through your body. It can be really useful if your baby's not in a good position in your pregnancy before you go into labour. So, like breech babies, sometimes it can be successful moving those. It can promote ripeness. So, if you're facing an induction, I think acupuncture can be really helpful. And then, of course, we often don't have needles during labour, so we can use what's called acupressure, which is honing in on those beautiful points, acupressure points that can promote progress and also dial down the sensations. So I'd encourage you to look a little bit further for some acupressure in labour information and practice pushing each other's buttons. Okay, so it's a good thing to use in labour, and I've seen it work really, really well with dialing down those sensations. Now, there's another particular tool which a lot of people don't appreciate the significance of, and that's the power of smell. Have you ever smelt something that's taken you back to a memory that you haven't thought of for 20 odd years? Now, our sense of smell is like a superhighway in the brain. It has the capacity to access different parts of the brain. And well, like women when they're pregnant often become super sensitive to bad smells. And by the way, they're often very super sensitive to bad smells in labour. So you don't want to breathe coffee all over her, or if you've had a piece of pizza and then you're close to her, she'll react to that. Like any mammal would, they're very, very sensitive to smell. But also you can use this as a superpower. When I was pregnant with my first son, Sam, I used to have baths and I'd put lavender in it. So I taught myself, not consciously actually, I did this by default to relax when I smelt lavender because I was used to relaxing in the bath with a bit of lavender oil. When I was halfway through my labour and I was getting a little bit tired and my midwife wanted me to sleep between contractions, she found the oil and she put it on. And I remember smelling the lavender in the middle of the labour and just going, oh, that's nice. Whoop. And there was a part of me that just deepened more into relaxation. So every time I smell lavender, I think of Sam, which is really funny because he's 27 now and he does not smell like lavender, but that's my association with him. So have a look at some different oils that you can look at. Train yourself in pregnancy to relax with those oils, and you can guarantee that they'll have quite an impact on your labour, helping you to relax. And of course, we know that the more relaxed you are, the more manageable labour becomes. Now, there's another tool called the TENS machine. The TENS machine, we've discovered, can be quite useful in labour. What it is a machine that you patch some electrical wires to your lower back, typically your lower back, and you get a handheld device. And every time you have a contraction, you press the button and it sends an electrical current into your lower back. Now, that electrical current gives your sensations a different quality. And when I've heard women talk about the benefit of it, they say, it just gave me something to focus on. It just changed the way I experience those sensations. Now, the thing with the TENS machine is you need to commit to it fairly early in the labour. If you bring it in too late, it tends to be less effective. You also can't hop in the shower and the bath with it for obvious reasons. Electricity and water doesn't tend to go very well together. But the good thing about the TENS machine is there's no residual effects on you or Bubby, which is always a good thing. So the TENS machine has become a bit of a popular tool in the toolkit. Some women say it was amazing. Other women say it didn't do much. If you do use it early in the labour and then you have a shower, you can put it back on again. So it is a tool worth looking at. Another good little tool to remember when it comes to finding comfort in labour is movement. Now, the active birth movement was a wonderful thing for women having babies because we used to put women on beds. And in my mother's day, they used to say, lie in the bed and not make too much noise. Well, in the 70s, we got jack of that. And we said, no, we want to move in labour. And the reason women wanted to move in labour is because it felt better. Not only that, it shortened labours. Now, movement's an interesting thing because women typically move in the way that gives them the most comfort. Some women don't want to move in labour and other women cannot be still. So you kind of got to be guided by the day. But movement is really, really supportive because when you're moving, say you're walking, you're supporting the descent of the baby onto that cervix. And the more pressure, the more descent, then the more the signals of that mother's body opening can happen. So movement's really powerful. And other women do things like they sit on birth balls. If you're watching this, you'll see me, I'm on one now. And just picture, when you're sitting on a big exercise ball and you push or make circles, hip circles, well, you're taking the part of that body that's really intense and you're pushing back against it. That's counter pressure. Okay. Another beautiful one is the labor dance, where you're standing and you're just rocking from side to side. And women typically love that in labour because it's pushing back against the pressure. And if you've got a beautiful person you love in front of you and you're holding on to them and doing the labour dance, it's a beautiful thing because you've got a bit of extra love there as well. Love and connection always supports labour. So movement is really powerful because you're pushing back against that intense pressure. Another one is changing positions. When women get a bit tetchy, you change positions. And what that helps her to do is to recalibrate to that new position. Now, women don't typically know what position they want to be in. So if you say to her, what position do you want to be in? She won't know because she can't think. But when she's in it, she knows. So just do a bit of troubleshooting for her, show her a few different positions and see which one she responds to. And then you're probably going to need to change it in a couple of hours. Okay. So changing positions typically supports the descent of that baby as well. There's another beautiful technique called rebozo. Rebozo is a long piece of material and it's been used traditionally all around the world. You can Google it. It's R-E-B-O-Z-O. And there's lots of things that we can do with the rebozo that can help shake and take pressure and tension away from her hips. It's a beautiful thing. It can also support good positioning for babies. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. There's another technique that can be very helpful if your baby is in the posterior position, which means it's turned around and the baby's spine is on your spine. That can give women very back achy labours. And so what we've learnt to do is to support women with what we call the sterile water injections, which is two midwives use 2 needles on either side and they inject sterile water into the layer of your skin, which interferes with the pain pathways. Now, I will warn you, when they do it, it stings very badly, but not for long. And given that you've been in labour, you can handle that. But it can actually give support for a woman who's having a real back achy labour. No residual effects on you or bubby. And the last one I want to just bring up, which is the bath. Okay. Now, most modern maternity services have beautiful big baths in their rooms. And I call the bath the epidural without the side effects. Most home births use baths, big blow-up pools. Okay. The heat and the pressure of the water just help her to relax. And you can ask your carers about the opportunities to have a water birth. It may not have been something that's been in your mind, but it's certainly worth thinking about prior to the day, getting your head around how that might work. Because I tell you, once you get in the bath, getting out is not something that you often want to do. So being able to give birth in the bath can be really powerful as well. Now, it's really interesting though, don't put all your eggs in that basket. People say, oh, the bath's going to be great. And then they get in and they get a bit hot, they get a bit overwhelmed. So it doesn't work all the time, like any of these tools. You just never know until the day. The other tool that I want to talk about is the breath. Now, out of all the people that I work with, on the other side, pretty much all of them say, I couldn't believe the power of the breath. The breath is the pathway to the relaxation response. It's what helps us to relax. And I've got a special episode in this series about the breath. So just go back and have a look for it and learn a little bit about the power of the breath. I always call it the number one tool in the toolkit. And then finally, the other tool that we can never underestimate the power of, and that is the mind. Our imagination, our capacity to take our mind somewhere other than what we're experiencing is very, very powerful. It's a form of distraction. We can use music. Music is a beautiful soother to the mind, particularly if you have an association with a particular playlist that you've got, maybe your wedding playlist or some playlists that you've really enjoyed in the past can really help bring you back into that state. Or focusing on words or images that are constructive rather than destructive. Some people, when they're in labor, they focus on the pain, the pain, the pain, and then they get more pain. Okay, so take your mind, find words and images that really resonate with you. Even do a birth picture, which is a beautiful thing to focus on in labor, that really harnesses your mind and directs you towards words and images that are going to be helpful, not unhelpful. Okay, so don't underestimate the power of the mind. It's certainly a tool in your toolkit. And then, of course, at the bottom of the bag, you've got the drugs if you need them. So I hope this episode has been helpful for you. We must realize that we are not without resources, both internally and externally. And I'd encourage you to have more than just one tool in your toolkit. So I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you again next week. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au? Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.